Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to another episode of Doctors Schuster and Oxley, The Power of Stories. Today's guest from the world of culture, HR, and business reinvention is Sue Walter, the CEO of the Roof Gardens. And I was reflecting, Helmet, on Sue's work at the Roof Gardens and thinking about where there might be similarities with our own challenge or our own mission to try and reimagine career advice books. And plenty of people build new things. I say plenty of people. It's not without its challenges, but starting a new concept from scratch doesn't carry that sense of legacy. It doesn't carry a sense of history. There are many, many more challenges, it seems to me, in taking something that has a history, has a unique identity, and then trying to give it a future. One of the phrases that, Helmut, you've shared with me that stayed with me is the idea of giving the past a future, the idea of taking something that was valuable once to us, but somehow has fallen out of favor and then reimagining it. But it's very difficult to do. I was thinking of all the examples recently that I've come across of people who've taken loved concepts and just got it wrong. There's the case of Jaguar that at the moment are trying to reinvent themselves, and it certainly hasn't at this stage turned out to be very successful. There was the classic case of Coca-Cola trying to change their formula in, what was it, the 80s and 90s, and that certainly didn't seem to succeed. And there's been a huge political backlash here in the US to something quite trivial. There's a restaurant chain called Cracker Barrel, and they've changed the font of their sign. And President Trump and all of his acolytes have gone nuts about the change of this font as a change of the legacy of the Cracker Barrel chain. Incidentally, the menu didn't change. It was just the font of the sign. So I find these things reinforce how complicated it is to take something where there is a treasured past and then somehow giving it a future to modernize it. The idea that the past or a legacy is great right up until the point that society or the community moves on and gets obsessed with something new, and then all of a sudden it falls out of favor. So how do you go about honoring something without turning it into a museum? How do you turn something that has genuine legacy, a genuine rich past, but give it a future? And I think there's a skill to that. We've been trying to do it in a very modest way with business books. And the complication is that you hit barriers, preconceived barriers about where it should fit. It needs to fit in this box. And if it doesn't fit in this box, either A, we're offended because you've somehow changed something that was familiar to us, or B, we just can't comprehend because it's somewhere different in the library. In our case, the idea of a career book that includes a story as well as some advice sort of sits between two genres, and as such, it doesn't compute. But as we were talking recently, Helmet, it's also a advantage to be something new, so long as you can continue to hold true to that tradition. So it's about holding true to a preservation of something that's really at its core the essence of the value proposition, but then translating it rather than changing it. Does that make sense? The idea of translating something into a new language, into a new societal context. I wondered, Helmet, whether you had any reflections on that.
Yeah, I mean, you basically said give the past a future, and I thought about that a lot because when I founded Chirimoy with my co-founder, I was much younger, and I said, listen, that's got to be really interesting, yeah, because I'm from a different generation. And the key thing is, and we aligned on give the past a future. And what that was basically mean, what was good in the old times, how can you translate that into something which is relevant in the current context? And I think that is so important. Yeah. And I still remember when Sue, when you told me first time that you're gonna run and open a new members club in the Kensington Roof Gardens, my first thought was, well, much luck to that, because formerly it was owned by Richard Branson, and it was like a club. And every year it deteriorated further, and it was like awful. But initially, it was basically the site which hosted Regine London, one of the most epic nightclubs in the world. And now I say I'm really very, very feel guilty that I even had this doubt that you could make that work, because the club is exactly give the past a future, invent, translate. And I think the key thing is, and there's so many great things about the club, it's also like no dress code.
Mm.
Like in London's private members clubs, there are dress codes. There are all these amazing people that don't want to dress up. They don't want to check it. Yeah. Now, still no dress code, but the people at the club are more glamorous than any other club in London. Yeah. And so compliments to you on that, Sue, and back to you, David.
Thank you.
So let me do a quick introduction of Sue, and then we'll ask Helmut to ask his cunningly simple and yet complicated questions. Sue describes herself as a curious optimist with nearly 30 years of leadership experience across hospitality, private equity, education, arts, culture, and publishing. We should talk about the publishing piece, incidentally, at some stage. Over the last 2 decades, she has focused on building hospitality concepts in the UK, North America, and Southeast Asia. Her personal mission drives her to redefine hospitality by creating spaces where everyone feels a real sense of connection and belonging. CEO of the Roof Gardens, Sue is focused on building a community. As you've gathered so far from our discussion, Roof Gardens is being relaunched, rebranded, repositioned, a complex task given its very rich and storied history. She talks about her values as kindness, which 100% agree with, optimism, and a desire to make a positive impact. The ethos of the Roof Gardens reflects her mission to create and prioritize meaningful human connections. So, Sue, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Helmut, over to you again.
Well, I probably know the answer to some of the questions I'm going to ask you. It's got to be 3 or 4. But first question is, what is your favorite book?
My favorite book is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And the reason it's my favorite book is because many people see it as a tragedy, but I see it as a book about hope surviving even in situation where all hope is dead. So I find it a very hopeful book.
I could not agree more. Now, second question really is, when you have a drink, what is your favorite drink, go-to drink at the club?
My favorite drink is, I don't have a very sweet tooth, so my favorite drink is anything kind of sour, like a margarita. That would probably be my drink of choice.
10 out of 10. It's my favorite drink out of choice, margarita. I love margaritas.
I
Okay.
didn't actually know that.
No, I love it. I love it. Now, the last question, because we want to hand over to you very in shortly. What is, and I think I know the answer to that, when you hire people, what is your principle of hiring? What is your basic, what are you looking for in people? Because I have to say, the people at the club are amazing. The team is out of this world.
I'm so glad you think so. So we hire people based on the same criteria that we recruit members into the club, because as far as I'm concerned, they're all part of the same community. So I hire people based on values and attitude rather than their CV.
Thank
Good
you so
answer.
much. You told me this answer before, and it impressed me so much. And I've stolen this so many times and used it in so many writing. Hire for attitude. I love it. Just love it.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm so glad. And I'm so glad that you found it to be true by interaction with my team as well. So that's great.
So, Sue, now is the time. The drum roll will
Okay.
be played when I edit it, but now is the time to turn over to you for your story.
Okay. Well, thank you both for having me on this wonderful podcast, which I've only just recently discovered, but I'm now very much an avid follower. I would like to start actually by asking the two of you a question, if that's okay. And the question is a very simple one. When was the last time somebody showed you an act of kindness? Something unexpected, perhaps even maybe from a stranger? And how did that make you feel?
You want to go first, Helmut, or shall I?
Don't deflect. Go first. I need to
I'll go
think. I need
first. No,
thinking
no, no.
time.
I didn't know. I don't want to steal your thunder. We, as you know, we're writing and getting our books out there. I think when I get an unsolicited note from someone that says that something that we've written helped them in some way or
Mm,
surprised them in a positive sense,
mm,
I don't think that I've ever had that level. You know, you go through life and you talk about rewards and recognition. Very often it's
mm,
financial, get a promotion, get a pay rise, get a better job. But nothing has ever felt quite as fulfilling to me as the kind word, the recognition of something done well.
mm.
So, yes, I got a lovely book review this morning. I'll take that as an example. That'll be what it is. Completely unsolicited. Talked about how it was something that really made a difference in someone's lives. And that made everything. It's not an easy thing writing books, but
No,
it made it all worthwhile.
wonderful. And Helmut?
Well, basically, I agree with the notion sometimes it's kind or generous words that really resonate. And just this morning, so we had a big event this weekend, and there was like this 22 or 23-year-old guy who helped us for basically nothing for 2 days. So he was working, he was doing stuff, and so on. And so I sent him a little thank you note, and he said, "No worries. I love what all of you doing, and I'm always trying to support you as good as I can. Thank you for the great friendships and experience you gave me." And I figured, wow, I was really emotionally touched because he helped us. And he said, "No, thank you for your generosity to inviting me into your universe of like Chirimoya." I found that very kind and very
It's
appropriate.
lovely.
Well, that's beautiful, and even even I'm touched by that, and that's kind of the theme a little bit of what I'm going to be talking about today, about how kindness is contagious. I think a lot about kindness, not as a soft, kind of vaguely pleasant idea, but as something that's genuinely transformative, something with real power. As Helmut knows, it is the foundation of the community that we are building here at the Roof Gardens, and I feel incredibly fortunate to have the freedom be able to build a community on values that really are very personal to me. I mean, unlike many members clubs, we are building a community based on the intrinsic rather than the extrinsic. And as you said, Helmut, things like no dress code, all the extrinsic stuff doesn't really matter. Mark Twain famously said, "Kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see." And I really love that because to me, it speaks to something that cuts through everything, every barrier, every visible difference, every distance between people, speaking to the idea that there is so much more that unites us than divides us. I mean, instinctively, we all know that kindness is a positive thing, but the science is now backing this up, which I find really interesting. Kindness isn't just good for the soul, it's good for the body. When we perform acts of kindness, our bodies release oxytocin. You talked about how you felt good when you received positive feedback. You probably have that same feeling when you give positive feedback. Oxytocin is otherwise known as the hormone, the love hormone. It lowers our blood pressure, reduces stress hormones like cortisol, and it promotes cardiovascular health. And it doesn't just stop with the person giving or receiving. Research also shows that the positive effects of kindness are experienced in the brain of every single person who witnesses it. If you think about times when you've witnessed other people being kind to each other, it generally improves the mood of everyone around them and it inspires others to pay it forward. One good deed in a crowded space can often create a domino effect that improves the day of dozens of people around them. Research also tells us that kindness fosters a sense of belonging and mutual respect and community. And this is really where it links into my work because social connection, which as we know, it's one of the key contributors to longevity. We read about this all of the time in the blue zones. And the beauty of it, the beauty of kindness is that any one of us can engage in it. It doesn't cost anything. And any one of us can engage in acts of kindness. It's accessible to all of us. And we don't need to complicate it. We don't need to put rules in place or institutions or structures to build something meaningful. We just need to choose kindness consciously, deliberately, and consistently. Kindness as a mindful practice creates connection, community, and belonging in a world where we are seeing growing divisions right now. And before I get into my story, I guess just one final thought. I suppose Amelia Earhart, she captured the power of kindness when she said a single act of kindness throws out roots in all directions. And those roots spring up and make new trees. And that image of roots spreading, of something growing from a single gesture, that's the theme of my story today. So if you're both happy, I'd like to go into my story. Or did
Please.
you have any thoughts?
Perfect. Yeah. Please. No, perfect. Perfect.
So my story is called The 378th Stranger. And I read it a while ago and it really, really stayed with me as a reminder that small, random acts of kindness matter. People often think that, a kind gesture has to be something really big, but it doesn't have to be. It can be something really small. Earlier on, you spoke about receiving positive feedback about your writing or about an act of kindness that you'd done for somebody else. Not only do small, random acts of kindness matter, but they can multiply and grow and connect people in really unexpected ways. So here's my story. In 2014, at a Starbucks drive-through in St. Petersburg in Florida, something extraordinary happened. A woman pulled up to a window and she did something small. She paid for the coffee of the person behind her, not because she knew them, not because she was having an exceptional day, just because she could. The stranger behind her was so moved by this gesture that they then decided to do the same. And then the next person, and then the next, and the next. For 11 hours, through the morning rush, through the lunch hour, through the afternoon, the early evening, 178 strangers kept this chain of generosity going. No one organized it. No one was watching. No one was filming. There was no campaign, no hashtag, no prize for participation, just the momentum of a good act and something deep in each person that said, I want to be a part of this. Just think about what that means. I mean, it's mind-blowing. Every one of those 378 people arrived at that window as a complete stranger. They didn't choose their place in a chain. There was no hierarchy. The person for whom they purchased the coffee didn't even know their name or get the opportunity to thank them. They simply witnessed a kindness and discovered that they too wanted to be kind. And here's what strikes me the most. Not one of them needed to continue this chain. Every single person in that chain could have just smiled and accepted their coffee and driven away. No one would have judged them, but they didn't do that because by that point, it wasn't really actually about the coffee anymore. It was about belonging to something larger than themselves. It was about feeling connected to something. It was about being, for one small moment, part of a community of complete strangers who had made a silent agreement to look after each other. The chain eventually ended, as all chains do, but that day, 378 people drove away carrying something that they hadn't expected, a feeling, that particular warmth of having given something freely without being asked and without expecting anything in return. And that's my story.
Wow.
Very good.
Just look, yep. Very moving. Very, very moving.
Yes.
Great sound effects.
I do. I remember there was a whole phenomenon that may be triggered by this event, that there were, even now, occasionally, if you go through a Starbucks line here in the US, that will happen. The person ahead will pay for your order, which is most unexpected. But there was a period, it feels like it might have been 9 or 10 years ago now, but there was a period where that was quite common, particularly around holidays, Christmas, New Year. Yes, it's a lovely story, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
I mean, I have questions, Helmut, but do you want to jump in first?
Well, for me, the many questions. I mean, the first question really is, of all the stories, why did you pick kindness? I mean, so I know you quite well, and your life is so rich, and you so look after society and after community. Why did you pick kindness?
Because I feel like kindness is our superpower, and I think sometimes we forget it. And it's so simple. It doesn't cost anything. It's a choice. And I don't know how many of us consciously think about kindness as a choice. And as you know, I feel strongly enough about it to build a community around it in my work. And the reason I picked it is I wanted to talk about something that really, really was important to me. And this is probably one of the most important things to me, is about living a life of kindness, encouraging others to be kind, setting the example of being kind. I just think it's more important now than ever, really, in the world that we live in.
I agree.
Can I ask
Go ahead.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Yeah.
Sure.
Because my firm belief is the majority of people are kind. The majority of people want to do good. But as you rightly said, it's actually people don't make choices. They're so overloaded with work and things and information that they don't think sufficiently about that life is about choices. Can you somehow relate to that?
100%. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, Helma. I actually believe that people do inherently want to be kind, and they are kind. And I think given the opportunity, most of us will choose generosity. But sometimes the noise of life, the pace of life means that without even thinking about it, we ignore someone, we say an unkind word, we perhaps don't take as much time as we should to support somebody. And I just think sometimes we just need to be inspired, and we just need to remember that small things matter. And I think that's really, for me, the purpose of that story. It's about one small act can create a chain reaction, and it can create momentum, whether it's in somebody's life, whether it's in the crowd, whether it's in the community that you're building. But I fundamentally agree that people are basically kind.
It's the disease of self-preoccupation, or in an age of social media where we talk a little bit about getting in this sort of virtual bubble where you commute to work in a virtual bubble and become very self-consumed, self-preoccupied, and being jolted out of that, which is the way I interpreted the event at the Starbucks, where someone did something unexpected and it jolted someone out of that sense of being withdrawn.
Mm.
I think is extraordinary. And then the dominoes fell in a different direction. But let me ask the question that I wanted to. Kindness very often seems to be held as a alternative and nice to do, but when you're in business, there are tough decisions. And the classic one is I can lay off 1,000 people to save the firm,
Mm.
or I can try and keep the 1,000 people employed and run the risk that the whole company goes bust. And so the question becomes, when tough decisions, and that's very often how they're phrased, so I'm sort of deliberately making it extreme, but when you're leading a business and you have responsibilities for this collectiveness, is kindness incompatible with making those tough decisions?
No, I don't think. I think sometimes that's an excuse. The term "it's not personal, it's just business," which people often use to justify perhaps behavior which makes other people feel bad. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a saint. And certainly in my career, I've made people feel bad and I've also made people feel good. And I know which I prefer and which one makes me sleep better at night. And I think for those of you that know me, I started out life in HR and I have made hundreds of people redundant and I have given thousands of jobs to people. But I think there is a way that you can implement really difficult decisions. And one of the most difficult decisions we have to make as a leader is to let somebody go. I think there's a way that you can do it and give people their dignity and treat them with respect and treat them with dignity. And I don't think it's necessary to completely destroy somebody's confidence and their self-worth when you're marching them out the door. Um, just because somebody doesn't work out for your business, it doesn't mean they can't work in a different type of environment with a different type of situation. And I think to me, it's just a mismatch when things don't work out. And so I try really hard to have conversations with people which are based on being adults, which are based on honesty and on transparency. And always, always, I make sure that people are looked after because at the end of the day, when they walk out the door, they still have homes, they still have families, they still have responsibilities. So we always try and look after people. And I've always been very fortunate before I became a CEO myself that I've worked with CEOs who have shared that belief in terms of looking after people.
Helmut, what do you
So,
think? I mean, I think very
well,
often business leaders are celebrated for being tough and for being no nonsense and for being sort of hard edged. Is that somehow a role model that we have ended up worshipping and we shouldn't worship, or that
well,
we're looking at the wrong things?
obviously we need to take the right decisions, and they're sometimes tough. But I think tough decisions don't have to be unkind. And I think it was Jack Welch who basically coined the term false kindness. And I was thinking about that for a very long time. And I think kindness is not to tell people what they want to hear. I think kindness is genuine care, authenticity. I think there's no point in lying to people just to make them feel better. I think true kindness is really to trying to help another person in a genuine way. And I mean, I truly believe sometimes we are wasting people's time, and companies do waste people's time. They have no career, they have no future, and rather than having the conversation saying, listen, you might be better off in another company, we tell them, oh, everything is good. I think that's nothing to do with kindness. I think the kindest act can sometimes be having a respectful conversation about letting somebody go. That might be the kindest act you sometimes can do in a certain context. So
I
can you?
agree. Completely agree with that. And but then the other side of it around, because obviously when we talk about unkind, we often talk about letting people go. But I think kindness makes business sense, growth of business as well, because the way in which we treat our team here at the Roof Gardens, where we think of them as part of our community, they don't sit outside of our community. They're recruited on exactly the same values. They are seen, they are understood, they are valued, we have a very open relationship with our team where we share all business information with them. Any member of my team can come in and talk to me at any point throughout that, I hold monthly surgeries, people come and talk to me, but by treating them respectfully and treating them well, my team then go on and treat our guests well. And because they're happy, they understand their work, they understand where they fit into the overall structure. And the feedback that you gave earlier about your experience with my team, Helmut, we get that feedback every single day from members. And I don't know if you've ever been in a venue where you've been served by someone who's clearly unhappy in their work. You don't feel good about having your meal, or, you don't feel good about your evening if the person looking after you is not happy. And I know it's a hackneyed phrase, but I really believe that by being kind to your team, by nurturing them, by looking after them, and that doesn't mean that you accept unacceptable behavior. It doesn't mean that you keep people on when you shouldn't keep people on. But it does mean that everybody understands where they stand. And in doing that, our community, our members, our guests actually feel the benefits of that. And to me, that's one of the things that sets us apart as a hospitality business.
I suppose the other thing that I would throw out for conversation is that there's easy kindness and there's hard kindness.
Yes.
There's a spectrum. I suppose it's not just a binary thing, but there's a spectrum. In some senses, the Starbucks illustration is easy kindness. It's an isolated incident that is requiring us to get our credit card out and pay for the people behind us. Then there's difficult kindness where it's complex, where it has a bigger cost to us, perhaps, where we're in an office environment and we feel like we're competing for a prize and someone says, that was a good idea. And do you take some credit for the idea, or is it shared credit, or is it something that you feel that you should yourself forward? The Americans are very big about you don't get something unless you ask for it. There's this very competitive, very individual approach towards business. Very ambition is worn nakedly on their sleeves. I think that's very different in the East. Eastern cultures tend to have a much more collectivist sense of respect. But when we talk about kindness, isn't it all of these dimensions? Personally, I feel some people are quite selective about when they're kind and when they're not. So I suppose in a way, I was just throwing that out.
Well, I think kindness, which is for show, is not really kindness. I mean, the beauty of the Starbucks example is the fact that these were all complete strangers. They didn't know each other. They'd never see each other again. I think when you're doing selective kindness, really, to me, is another way of saying I'm only kind when it serves me. And that's not true kindness. Kindness is about being of service to others without expecting anything in return. The distinction, David, you made between American culture and, say, culture somewhere like the UK is, I think you have to create an environment for kindness. I think you have to, again, going back to the Starbucks example, that one act enabled and gave for others license to be kind. And I think you have to create the right environment for it. Hospitality, particularly in the UK, is known as being toxic and being unkind, where people are disposable and not treated well. It's very difficult for kindness to flourish in that environment. I think you have to have the right environment for it. And if you can create an environment where people feel safe, they feel valued, they feel seen, then why wouldn't they step forward and say, I've got this idea, or that was my idea? But if you have an environment of fear, people are not going to do that.
Yeah, this is so true. You said one thing which really made me think the last 20 minutes now. You said like kindness is or correlates with longevity. And that made me think of my mother, because my mother actually lived until like 97, and she was really healthy until like 2 months before. And the funny thing is, she never, as I can remember, she never said anything bad about anyone. And if somebody started complaining, she always defended them. I've never heard her say ever a negative word about anyone. And she was in this community, which was the health spa. And I sometimes go there now, and they would not know who I am. They only call me, oh, you're the son of Frau Schuster, which is my mother, yeah? It is so amazing how this community carried her because of her kindness, and it probably or maybe made her live long, healthily.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a really correlation, maybe.
I think I know how you feel, Helmut. Wherever I go, I'm referred to as you're the other one. There's Schuster, and then there's you're the other one. So I get that all the time.
This is so not true. He is the star. Okay.
Dr. Schuster and the other one.
we need to basically acknowledge David is the star,
Wherever I go. I
basically,
mean,
of the
it's not
duo.
limited to London. Wherever I go, I
I
get that.
have to say, David, Helmut has always talked about you as being the star. Even this morning, he texted me and said you were the star. But I'm loving this bromance between the two of you. I have to say. But Helmut, the example of your grandmother, kindness is the key that unlocks community. That's how we make human connection.
Yeah.
And your grandmother, I would imagine her funeral probably was packed. And I think her legacy is the people's lives that we touch, and we touch people through acts of kindness and
They
empathy and
still
compassion.
talk about her. Yep.
Yeah.
You're so right.
With a view to sort of bringing this stage of the conversation towards a little bit of a close,
Yeah.
do you think the reflection of kindness is about our own sort of mental health or our own sense of being centered? I tend to feel, either through the books that I've read on the subject of radical compassion or radical candor and all of these books that are out here about, some of it is our own neurosis, our own insecurities, our sense of, I talked about being self-consumed, but this idea that we interpret what other people say through our own filters of
Mm.
being defensive, and that triggers things. And the people who are the healthiest seem to be the kindest in some senses, that there isn't the narcissistic trait, there isn't the sense of being offended all the time because I mean, if you really want to, you can go through a day getting offended by an email or a text or,
Yeah,
the
of course.
fact that someone didn't hold the door open for you or
Mm.
whatever it might be. Or you can just go through life unaffected by that, very much centered in your own sense of being valued and being a good human. Do you think the two things are somehow connected? I mean, we have to work on ourselves to be confident enough in our own self-worth to be kind?
100%. I think we can spend too much time in our own head. I mean, you mentioned social media earlier, and you've only got to scroll through social media to see that most posts are about the individual. And how many posts do you see which are about other people or about seeing something good or which is outside of the individual? And going back to the intrinsic and the extrinsic. And I just feel that we spend far too much time perhaps focusing on the wrong things. And I can go through a day and just focus on myself and how I want other people to make me feel and seeking that validation from external people. And I guarantee you by the time I get home, I'll be miserable because nobody ever lives up to your expectations. It's just not the way that it works. And it's unfair of other people to put our expectations on them in that way. Or I can go through the day, as Maya Angelou said, thinking about how would I like to make other people feel today? And that makes me feel so much better.
Yeah.
Anything more from you, Helmut?
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, a thought really is, I think if you're focused on being kind, I think you don't mess yourself up in life. I mean, there is a reason why the Boy Scout of America and the Boy Scout of Europe and the Boy Scouts of, and now they're probably called Boys and Girl Scouts, as I'm not sure how to refer to that. But the point was every day you had to do an act of kindness. So that's what you had to do. Every day an act of kindness. And I think it led to probably a more wholesome and healthy mindset in the long term.
Well, there was actually, I don't have the date of it, but there was a study done by Oxford University where they found that doing an act of kindness every day for 7 days is enough to change how people felt, their happiness scale on the happiness scale. So that's just 7 days. 7 days of
Yeah.
being kind made people feel happier. And I do think there is something in that, actually, just making that conscious choice. Whether it's you hold the door open for someone or you buy
Yeah.
the Starbucks, or you remember to say thank you to someone who's done something for you, or you just get up and let somebody sit down, or, just that small act, just doing something like that once a day, it becomes a practice, and eventually a practice becomes a habit.
Yeah. Very well
And I feel
said.
like this is a point at which to wrap this up. So one of the things that happened to me that was incredibly affected me in very deeply, I went on to get my doctorate, and he got some personalized stationery made with my name with doctor in front of it, and I treasure it. In fact, it's too good to use. I have it behind me occasionally. I use it. There are things like that that you have in your life that have such deep meaning. The big things that really impacted me deeply that I carry with me that I jealously hold as memories. Uh, Not the promotion I got, not
Mm.
the first company car I ever had. As much as those were nice things at the time, I don't deny that I enjoyed driving the new company car around. But they were fleeting, and they were sort of gone. They were somewhat disposable. I find this conversation reminds me of people really were very kind. They
Mm.
didn't have to do that, and it was very thoughtful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Helma.
And that's actually takes us back to your grandmother, Helmut. Those acts of kindness that people never forget.
So on that note, we typically ask Helmet. Helmet typically builds this up to ask one final question before we close. So Helmet, over to you.
Yeah, it's just one question, Sue, and it really is for our audience. Just what is if you have to give one tip to a young person today, what would it be? One tip, career tip.
I think it would be about stop trying to be something you're not. I think you need to be authentic, and again, that's another overused term. But what do we mean by authentic? When I started out my career, I basically was looking at all the men around me because it was all men when I started out, and I was trying to be them. And their style was typically more aggressive. It was typically more unkind, and I did that for a while, and it didn't fit. It didn't suit me, and actually, I was not as successful when I was trying to emulate them. Figured out that actually that by having faith in my own abilities, the things which make me unique, that I actually would be a far better leader and far better at my job. And the moment I became authentic and just thought I'm going to be the best leader that I can be based on the skills that I have, that's really when my career started to take off. And I think there is something about figuring out what value you bring on a personal level and really, really using that and trusting it.
Excellent. Back yourself. Trust yourself. Sue, fantastic. Anything else that you'd like to share? The roof gardens are doing well. Are they open to new members? Would you invite anyone to apply? Kindness is a prerequisite, incidentally, to any of our listeners.
Kindness is definitely a prerequisite. The Roof Gardens is doing very well. We are actually getting very close to closing our membership, but if anyone is interested, please just go to our website, click on the link, and good luck. Good luck with your application. Obviously, we always want good people.
Great. Well, that was amazing. That was a fantastic conversation. Thank you for setting that up, Sue, and
It's my
for
pleasure.
Helmet for introducing Sue to the podcast listeners. If you have enjoyed this podcast, this is number 27 in the series. Please check out the others. Sue had checked out a couple before we started this recording and said that she thought they were amazing. So I'm just paraphrasing. Hopefully that's
I
roughly
love
right.
them.
Thank you. Helmet is very insistent that when we close these podcasts, that I remind everyone that if you like this podcast, you will love the books. There are 3 books out, the Shea Sinop saga, now in a special edition collector's set, if anyone's interested. But please go and check out the books. Our website has new content updated every week, and our social media channels, LinkedIn and Instagram in particular, are well worth checking out for some amusing and thought-provoking content, in that order. With that, I will come to a conclusion of my comments. Helma, anything finally you'd like to add?
Well, thank you very much, Sue, for spending an hour with us. And auf Wiedersehen and tschüss, bis bald.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for
Okay.
inviting.